Hey guys, Elegant Mess here. Today we're going to do a video on the Sony VAIO F-Series. We're going to be covering a couple of videos for this one. We're going to do cleaning, how to disassemble, clean the entire inside motherboard, and then we're going to go through how you would replace the actual heatsink and fan itself. If you're having cooling problems, a lot of the times the factory thermal paste for the processor and the graphics card isn't the best stuff, wasn't applied so well, it's been a while, anything like that. If you're having heating issues, reapplying new thermal paste to both the processor and the graphics card will definitely help quite a bit. I do it on a fairly regular basis, every couple of months, maybe, you know, if you're not a very enthusiastic user, maybe once a year, but it's something you definitely want to do. It'll help you with your, if you're having high temperatures, it'll help quite a bit. So we're going to go through first with the disassembly, and we'll get started with that, and we'll go from there. So with the disassembly, first go ahead, take the battery out. Now for the disassembly of this, you're going to need to take out every screw that you see in the back of this. There's one here for the Blu-ray drive, another one for the RAM, and the hard drive. I'll take those screws and actually leave them right in the casing of it, just not to get those confused with any of the other ones. I like to use a magnetic screwdriver to helps a little bit, so we're not dropping things. Go ahead and remove all the screws. Try and keep track of them. I'll usually, whatever screws that are in, like the cover for the RAM here, the hard drive, I'll take those screws and leave them right back in the plastic casings for them, just not to get them confused with anything else. For the RAM. Now to remove the RAM on this, if you've never removed the RAM from a laptop, there we go. The right on the side of it here, there's little clips. Just push each one to the side, to the left or right of it. Just push them to the side and it'll pop right out. Should pop right up for you. And then just kind of wiggle it back and forth a little and they'll pop right out. Same with the secondary one. Now I have gone ahead and installed a higher speed and more RAM. It initially came with 6 gigs. I went ahead and upgraded to a higher grade 8 gig set of RAM. So with that removed, go ahead and finish off with the rest of them. 2 for the hard drive removed. Case comes right off. I'll just take the screws and pop them right back in the case. And there's going to be a few screws holding the hard drive in. We can go ahead and take those right out. Now if you have a little tray or something, or draw yourself a diagram of the laptop itself so you know where the screws go back, because the screws are different sizes, so you'll need to remember where they go. Now for removing the hard drive, there's a little plastic film on it. Just pull it back. Hard drive comes right out. And again with these ones, I'll take the screws, put them right back into their spots. Go ahead and remove the rest of the screws on the back and the underside of the battery as well. This is also a, so you know ahead of time, this is a Sony VAIO F-Series. The actual model number is the VPCF FM, yeah, 115. It has the Intel Core i7 quad processor. It's a very powerful laptop. It's a great laptop. Before I started building desktops, I used this laptop for gaming and for college. But this laptop will run Battlefield 3, any of your modern games. I was getting hooked up to an external monitor, 1920 by 1080. I was getting anywhere between 45 and 60 frames a second with Battlefield 3. So it's a very nice laptop. Some of the holes are a little bit smaller, so make sure you have a nice small set of screwdrivers, but instead of turning the laptop upside down and letting the screws drop out, take the magnetic screwdriver in there once it's unscrewed from its home. Can't fit it in, you can always just take it right to it. As I said, don't forget the small screws for under the battery, and there will also be 2 more small screws right near where the battery makes its connection, right here. CD drive right out. Then screw right back into it. Okay, now that we've got both sides of the keyboard removed, just take the screwdriver right into one of the bottom corners here and just push it forward, and you'll see it come out of the bottom clips. Now when you remove it, just take it and fold it right towards you, so it'll be connected right on the back. There's two connections, one for the backlight of the keyboard and the other for the keyboard functions itself. For the keyboard one itself, the longer one, it's just got a little black clip. You just push it in, push it out on both sides, and it'll release it. There's one. And with the backlighting, there isn't even a piece holding it in place. Just give it a nice gentle tug, and it'll come right out. There's your keyboard. So if you had to replace the keyboard, this is also how you would do it. So there's our keyboard. So if for cleaning, go ahead and get yourself a can of compressed air. And always hit it a couple of times before you use it, just in case there's any moisture caught on the top of it. And just gently go over it first. Just to remove any excess stuff that's sitting on the top. Then you can get a little bit closer to it. Careful with the speakers, you will see them flex. If you get too close, you can break them, so just be careful. Very careful. If you see any dust particles that you can't get with a can of compressed air, I have a nice paintbrush that I use just for cleaning purposes, obviously, so there's nothing else on it. And then go ahead and just wipe anything that's on there away. And gently, of course. This is a good way to get into the speaker crevices. And then also underneath the hinges. Sorry. The hinges here. This is a good spot where dust likes to collect, right underneath in there. So get something in there, maybe a small pair of needle nose pliers, something of that nature, to get any of the debris out of there. As I said, I clean this fairly often, so there really isn't too much here. But surprisingly, it does collect pretty quickly, so get everything nice smooth once over. At this point, this is the top of the fan for the heatsink. Go ahead and close the lid gently. And the screws are out of the back, so just keep a hand on the bottom. It should still be clipped in. But once everything is removed, also there's 3 screws under the Blu-ray drive on the side. So once those are all removed, just take a screwdriver or a nail file, whatever you have, right under the side here, and just push up a little bit, and you'll feel it snap right out. as I said, the connections on this side stick out of the bottom casing a little bit. So if you just lift up on the left side of it, as you go along, undo any of the connections. Looks like it's free. Just go ahead, wiggle it back and forth just to get it out of the connections on the back side. And it should come right off. And again, we'll take a can of the compressed air, just lightly over it. And then again, I'll just go right over it with the brush just to get anything that sticks onto it. You can see on the back side here where the fan and heatsink sit. You'll see a nice little circle there from where the fan sits on it. Sorry about the light. There you go. And just take your brush to it and just brush that right off, because that's where the exhaust from the fan comes out to the side here. And I'll give a good once over on the entire inside of it, getting into all the crevices. Okay. So now we've got a good look here at the motherboard itself. Here's our fan and the heat pipes coming down to the two heat sinks for the processor and the graphics card. So we're going to go ahead, and there's going to be 4 screws on each one, 2 here, 2 here, and then for the processor, 2 here and here. Okay, now that we've got everything taken off, keyboard and then the back plating, we're going to go ahead and remove the fan and the heat sinks to get to the thermal paste. If you're replacing the heat sink, this is how you're going to do it. Should be a piece similar to this. I don't know if the replacement fan is the same color, but you should see the fins on it and everything should look pretty similar. This plate here is a big back plate for the motherboard, so the unit will just come with the pipes, the fan, and the 2 copper pieces sitting over the processors. So we'll go ahead and remove the 4 screws over each of the processors. Now this is the CPU. This is the Intel Core i7 quad core, 2nd gen. It's a very nice processor. The graphics is a NVIDIA GT330M. M is mobile. You'll usually see that in all the listings for your laptops. But surprisingly, with that graphics card, it's matched with this processor. You get a very good combination between the two. As I said, Battlefield 3 running on an external monitor, 1920 by 1080, full settings that I normally run at, which is like a high, medium, high. Some of this stuff just really isn't necessary. I'm getting about 45 to 60 frames a second, so very, very respectable. bit smaller. Now, if this is the first time replacing the thermal paste, or if you're replacing the heatsink, the thermal paste that's on these is not a pad, it's actual thermal paste. And the first time I did it, it wasn't caked down the processor very well. I'll show you how it was for the first time I did it. Now that the screws are removed, excuse me, we can go ahead and we'll disconnect the power connection for the fan, and that's all that's really holding it in place. Get yourself a small pair of needle nose pliers. There's a little lip on the 4-pin power connection. See if I can get you a good view here. Right here is the 4-pin power connection for the fan and the heat sinks. There's a little lip right underneath it. If you have nails, you could probably get right underneath there, but I like to use a nice pair of needle nose pliers, and that works pretty well. See just on the top of it, don't really need to apply a lot of pressure. It is plastic and it will bend and break if too much is applied. Just wiggle it back and forth, turn it off. And also on mine there was a piece of tape just holding it down in place so it wasn't loose. Just remove that from it. If this is your first time, again, they may be stuck a little bit. Once the screws are out, you can lift it up by the screw connections for the heatsink. If they're stuck, just try and give it a nice little wiggle. You don't want to apply too much pressure. The processor will come out, but the GPUs on these are permanent to the motherboard, so those cannot be removed. As you can see, the thermal paste on these is still pretty wet, hasn't dried out at all. The first time I did it, didn't look anything like these. See how it's kind of shiny, still moist. Yeah, over the centers of these there was almost nothing. It was all caked around the edges as they applied either too much thermal paste and or too much pressure and pushed it all out to the sides, and there was just about none over each of them. So definitely not good on the assembly part. To remove any thermal paste, the first time I actually had to use a razor blade. Very carefully, it took me about 45 minutes or an hour to get both of these clean. But once you get the majority of it off, or if it's a decent thermal paste and it's not dried out, I just get a couple of cotton balls and some Q-tips. I use a 91% isopropyl alcohol. And we'll just go ahead, I just poke a couple holes in the top so it's not squirting all over the place, and just dampen your Q-tip or cotton ball Usually I'll start with the cotton ball and then finish up with the Q-tip to get any excess that's off of it. And you'll be able to wipe it right off. Now if you did get your Q-tip or cotton ball too moist and you see it dripping out, that's alright. That's why we use the isopropyl alcohol, because it's, you know, safe to use. It'll dry almost immediately, so. And it's also good to get the thermal paste off your fingers too if you get it in the eye. Looks like we have the majority off. As I said, I did this just a couple of months ago, so it's still very moist. So usually dry out a little bit after a couple of years of use, depending on how long you had your laptop, how heavy you use it. For the Q-tips, go ahead and stick it right to the hole. And you'll see it wick right into the Q-tip. And again, with the Q-tips, I don't want them overly wet. I just don't want them drenched, but I want to still be able to pick up any excess that you miss. It's also good to clean up any of the PCB board, the green board that's behind it. If you do get anywhere, you see any excess runoff. It'll also clean fingerprints, anything like that off of it. Processor looks good and clean. Graphics card looks good and clean. Again, I'll wait till I take off all the thermal paste. Just so before I do dust anything, I'll take off all the thermal paste, so there's nothing for the dust to stick to on the board itself. As I said, the isopropyl alcohol will come off pretty quickly. It'll dry right up on you. Go ahead and wipe everything out. Still looks pretty clean. Can't see any dust flying. Also, this will void your warranty. So, if you do this and you have to send it back and they don't accept it, you be warned. Okay, with that done, we'll go ahead and remove the thermal paste from the back of the heat sinks. Now, you see me handling the copper pieces like this, you're going to leave greasy fingerprints all over it, doing it like that. So, be sure after you do clean everything off, go ahead with more of the isopropyl alcohol and Q-tips, cotton swabs, and wipe down any of the pieces that are copper, because you're going to leave greasy fingerprints, and it won't damage it, but it'll burn marks right into it. Because the grease on our hands and oils are very corrosive. Okay, that's pretty good. And at this point, you can go ahead and clean the actual fan itself. Go ahead and clean the actual fan itself and the heatsink. The little fins coming out here. Take a can of the compressed air. I usually keep my hand right on the back of it for the first time and try and blow towards the fins, and it'll, any of the majority of it will blow right out, and then same in the reverse, blowing into the fins up through the fan. Flip it over, same with the back side. And then also, I like to keep a hand on the fan itself to keep it from spinning when you blow the air into it. I don't see anything coming out. A couple pieces. Okay, with the fan cleaned, go ahead and wipe up the motherboard, any dust particles that are laying out, anything like that. And we're going to go ahead and apply thermal paste. I like to use Arctic Silver 5. Now, to apply the thermal paste to the processors themselves, I found that I think it's an actual makeup brush. But the one end is almost like a foam sponge, and the other end is a brush. But the foam sponge actually works quite nicely. So we're going to go ahead and apply right around the outside of them. And I just do one stripe in the middle. You could probably use like a nice firm credit card or something of that nature. I try to work from the outside corners in, making sure that there's no air bubbles, but nice even coverage. I won't do a real heavy coat, but a decent amount, because this is going to cover both this side and the side of the heatsink. So just try and smooth it out the best you can. Okay. I'll take the brush and just finally go over the top of it, just to smooth anything out. Okay, so we've got our thermal paste applied to both the processors. So I'm going to go and take a little bit of the alcohol and just clean up around the edges a little bit. Just to get any of the excess off. More just nitpicking on my end, but that's okay. Okay. So the thermal paste is all set. And as I said, after handling the heatsink itself, I'm going to go ahead and take some of the alcohol and rub that over the heatsink to take off any of the fingerprints. Just that way none of the residual oil from my hands will be on there. Plus it helps keep it clean. Go ahead, do the back side.